What if, in the midst of searching for new threats during the Cold War, the CIA stumbled upon materials that could change the course of history? What if Iran, in the shadows of international diplomacy, had been hiding secrets capable of causing a global catastrophe? Deep within classified CIA archives, documents were uncovered that confirmed the existence of a cutting-edge nuclear weapon program in Iran. One so advanced, it had the potential to level the playing field between superpowers. This revelation would not just alter the balance of power in the Middle East, but shake the entire world order to its core. These were not the mundane secrets typically found in spycraft. These were weapons that could wipe out entire cities, disrupt economies, and send the world into a new age of uncertainty. As tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union escalated, this discovery raised the stakes to unimaginable heights. If these documents were to see the light of day, the political fallout could trigger the very war the CIA had desperately tried to avoid. These materials were still classified under the most secure levels of secrecy. Their contents a Pandora's box, one that threatened to unravel not only the security of the United States, but the global status quo itself. What the CIA uncovered in Iran was not just about bombs or missiles, but a full-scale reimagining of the military landscape. Iran, a nation once considered a mere ally in the struggle against communism, had become a hidden titan, developing nuclear technology that rivaled that of the world's leading powers. The frightening truth was this: Iran's ambitions were not just regional. They had global consequences, ones that could lead to the collapse of the carefully constructed order in the Cold War. This discovery could have led to unprecedented global confrontation. Iran's nuclear ambitions were being carefully concealed, and the intelligence community knew that the longer these secrets stayed hidden, the more dangerous they would become. After the CIA successfully orchestrated the 1953 coup that restored the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, to power, Iran became a strategic ally of the United States in the fight against the spread of communism. The U.S. provided substantial military and economic aid to ensure the stability of the Shah's regime, which was seen as a bulwark against Soviet influence in the Middle East. But beneath the surface of this formal alliance, darker secrets were brewing. Iran, despite its official friendship with the U.S., began quietly pursuing a nuclear weapons program. The Iranian government's interests shifted, and by the late 1950s, they started to covertly develop nuclear capabilities, collaborating with radical scientists who had fled Europe after the war. These scientists, many of whom had once worked on secret German military projects during World War II, brought with them invaluable knowledge about advanced nuclear technology. This collaboration was not just about acquiring energy resources, but about something far more dangerous: nuclear weapons. Iran's ambitions were quickly becoming clear. They intended to develop a weapons program that could rival the West's nuclear powers, one capable of destabilizing the region and shifting the balance of power globally. But this was a highly secretive initiative. The scientists who worked on the project did so in isolation, and the Iranian government went to great lengths to keep their nuclear ambitions hidden from the United States and other world powers. The CIA's decision on how to handle this information would shape the course of history. Would they expose the truth, risking the wrath of a nation with newfound nuclear power? Or would they suppress the details, leaving the world in the dark about the grave threat lying just beneath the surface? At the time, the Cold War was in full swing. The world was divided between the US and the Soviet Union, each trying to expand its influence across the globe. In this tense geopolitical climate, Iran's newfound nuclear aspirations could tip the scales in a major way. While the US was focused on containing Soviet influence, it was unaware that Iran was developing a weapon that could potentially shift the balance of power not just in the Middle East but globally. Iran, once considered a stable ally in the Cold War, was quickly becoming a wild card in the game of global dominance. Their nuclear program had the potential to destroy existing geopolitical structures. The Middle East, already a region fraught with tensions and competing interests, could be plunged into chaos if Iran succeeded in creating nuclear weapons. This wasn't just about regional dominance. It was about challenging the entire international order, and no one, not even the United States, fully understood the depth of the threat Iran was cultivating in secret. As Iran's nuclear ambitions grew, the implications for the US and its allies became more terrifying. The existing geopolitical structures that had been carefully maintained since the end of World War II were under threat. If Iran succeeded in developing a nuclear arsenal, it would not only have the power to challenge the West, but also destabilize the fragile balance that had been painstakingly constructed to prevent global conflict. The situation was becoming ever more dangerous. Iran's increasing isolation, combined with its nuclear ambitions, would soon become a ticking time bomb, a threat that, if left unchecked, could alter the course of history forever. In 1959, CIA agent Jonathan Jeffries was stationed in Tehran, working as an undercover diplomat. The Cold War was in full swing, and tensions between the superpowers were mounting. Jeffries had spent years tracking Soviet influence in the region, but he had no idea how much darker and more dangerous his next mission would become. His assignment seemed simple: gather intelligence on Iranian military developments, specifically related to their nuclear program. Little did he know, he was about to uncover a secret that would rock the foundations of global politics. One late evening, Jeffries received a document from an anonymous Iranian informant. The document was heavily redacted, but the parts that were visible made Jeffries' blood run cold. It was a blueprint for a new type of missile, a mobile nuclear missile capable of bypassing even the most advanced defense systems in the world. The document was marked with the cryptic name, Project Shah. At first, Jeffries thought it was a mistake, maybe an elaborate hoax. But as he dug deeper, he realized that this was no joke. The document referenced highly classified military technology, information that only a handful of people in the world could have known. It described a missile system that could not only carry nuclear payloads, but also be moved quickly, making it nearly impossible to intercept before launch. The implications of such a weapon were staggering. A mobile nuclear missile would mean that Iran could strike any location in the world without warning, completely bypassing the heavily fortified systems that were in place to protect major military and political hubs. The balance of power in the region, and possibly the world, was about to shift dramatically. But the real horror lay in the details of the project. Iran was not working alone. The document contained references to German scientists, some of whom had once worked on the infamous Nazi rocket programs during World War II. These were not just any scientists, but individuals who had been involved in developing the V-2 rocket and other advanced military technologies under Adolf Hitler's regime. After the war, many of these men had escaped prosecution and were quietly brought to Iran, where they were working under complete secrecy. It was a dark alliance, a country still haunted by the ghosts of its past, teaming up with the architects of one of the most destructive wars in history. These German scientists had been helping Iran develop new rocket technologies that were on the cutting edge of the global arms race. The research included breakthroughs in propulsion systems and guidance mechanisms, making the missiles far more accurate and devastating than anything previously developed. The weapon was no longer theoretical, it was real. Jeffries' heart raced as he realized the magnitude of the information he was holding. This wasn't just about Iran building a nuclear weapon. It was about a new breed of warfare, one that could completely rewrite the rules of engagement. If Iran succeeded in creating this technology, it would have the power to change international treaties, political alliances, and the very fabric of global security. No longer would nuclear weapons be tied to traditional military bases or siloed systems. The game had changed. But there was more. The project didn't just stop at the missile itself. The Project Shah blueprint described a revolutionary guidance system that allowed these missiles to travel with pinpoint accuracy across vast distances, capable of reaching targets in Europe, Africa, and even parts of North America. Iran would no longer need to rely on traditional military strategies or form alliances with other powers. They would have the autonomy to act alone, with the ability to strike anywhere, at any time. For Jeffries, this discovery was both a triumph and a curse. As he prepared to report his findings to his superiors, he began to understand the full scope of what he had uncovered. This wasn't just about espionage or covert operations. This was about global survival. The introduction of such technology into the hands of an unstable regime could spell the end of international diplomacy as we knew it. But as Jeffries pieced together the information, he realized that there were many more layers to this conspiracy. The document made mention of unverified transactions and hidden funds, all linked to shadowy organizations that spanned continents. It became clear that this missile program was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Iran's nuclear ambitions were merely a part of a broader geopolitical game, one that included secret alliances, arms deals, and the active efforts to circumvent international oversight. As Jeffries delved deeper, he began to question just how far Iran was willing to go to conceal its plans. His discovery wasn't just a revelation about military technology. It was a dark glimpse into the heart of the Cold War itself, where the boundaries between allies and enemies were constantly shifting, and no one could be trusted. The truth was more terrifying than he could have imagined. The Iranian government, despite its alliances with the US and its role in the fight against communism, was preparing for something far more sinister. They weren't just developing nuclear weapons, they were preparing to use them, leveraging cutting-edge technology to gain the upper hand in the Cold War, making any confrontation between superpowers even more dangerous. Jeffries knew that he had to act fast. The document he had uncovered wasn't just evidence of a covert operation. It was the first piece of a dangerous puzzle that could ignite a world war. Iran, with the help of Nazi scientists, was no longer a mere ally of the US or a pawn in the larger Cold War struggle. They were now a direct threat, armed with the potential to topple the entire global order. And Jeffries had just stumbled upon the key to everything. As he prepared to report his findings, he couldn't shake the feeling that the discovery of Project Shah was only the beginning. There was still so much more to uncover, and every layer he peeled back only seemed to reveal darker truths. What had Iran been planning all along? And how much of this secret alliance with Nazi scientists was still hidden from the world? The stakes had never been higher. The Cold War was no longer just a battle between superpowers. It was a fight for survival in an era where new weapons, new technologies, and new alliances could change everything. The world was about to find out that the game had changed, and not everyone was playing by the same rules. As the CIA's Operation Shadow Sun commenced in early 1961, the stakes could not have been higher. This wasn't just another covert mission. This was the discovery of a game-changing threat that could potentially shift the balance of power in the Cold War. The mission's objective was clear: infiltrate Iran's remote laboratories and uncover the full extent of their nuclear and missile capabilities. Iran's nuclear ambitions had become more than just a whisper among intelligence agencies. They were an undeniable reality. After receiving Jeffries' chilling report on Project Shah, the CIA had moved swiftly. The task now was to gather irrefutable evidence of the threat posed by Iran's burgeoning missile program. The location was a well-kept secret. The Iranian research labs nestled deep in the Elburz Mountains, far from prying eyes. These were the kinds of places that only the most hardened intelligence agents could infiltrate, and the CIA had dispatched its most skilled operatives to penetrate this fortress of secrecy. The agents, armed with cutting-edge espionage technology, began their descent into the mountains. Their mission was to gather intelligence on the mobile nuclear missiles that Iran was secretly developing. But they were about to uncover far more than they ever anticipated. The laboratories were situated miles from any known settlement, isolated by treacherous terrain and surrounded by high-security barriers. It was clear that the scientists working there had been told to leave no trace of their existence, an operation conducted in total secrecy. The intelligence team employed a combination of state-of-the-art surveillance tools, including satellite imagery, wiretaps, and human intelligence to monitor the lab's movements. For weeks, agents in disguise infiltrated the region, collecting scraps of information. They were working against the clock, knowing that Iran's missile program was rapidly advancing, and every hour that passed brought the world closer to a possible catastrophe. It wasn't long before the agents found a breakthrough. Hidden in a heavily guarded section of the laboratory, they discovered a document, carefully sealed in an encrypted compartment. It was titled Dark Star, a highly classified report that would soon shake the intelligence community to its core. The document, written in technical jargon, confirmed what the CIA had long feared. Iran had completed the preliminary phases of a nuclear missile capable of bypassing the world's most advanced defense systems. The document was clear. These were not the typical weapons of mass destruction, meant to threaten only regional adversaries. These missiles were capable of striking any target across continents, and their design had been optimized to outmaneuver all known countermeasures. The nuclear warheads could be launched from mobile platforms, making it nearly impossible for the United States or its allies to defend against them. The scope of the project was much larger than anticipated. The report detailed plans for a fleet of nuclear-armed missiles, each designed to be virtually invisible to radar detection and capable of altering the outcome of any conflict. It became clear that Iran had no intention of using these missiles merely for deterrence. The true purpose of these weapons was to exert power over the global stage, using them as tools of nuclear blackmail. The Dark Star document also contained a chilling revelation. Iran's government was planning to use these weapons to manipulate international politics. The missile program was not simply a response to geopolitical threats. It was a strategy to reshape the Middle East and place Iran at the helm of regional power. The report spoke in detail about blackmailing neighboring countries with the threat of nuclear retaliation, forcing them to comply with Iranian demands for strategic control over critical regions like the Strait of Hormuz, a vital global oil shipping route. As the CIA operatives continued to gather more information, they stumbled upon additional intelligence that further deepened the mystery surrounding Iran's nuclear ambitions. They uncovered blueprints and notes detailing new materials that Iranian scientists had developed for nuclear warheads, materials that could dramatically increase the effectiveness and yield of the weapons. These were cutting-edge technologies that had not yet been fully realized by any other nuclear power, including the Soviet Union and the United States. The materials included revolutionary composite materials for warhead casings, which would allow the warheads to withstand the intense heat and pressure of re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. The designs were so advanced that even the best analysts within the CIA were unsure whether they could be matched by American or Soviet technology in the near future. Iran, once seen as a backward country, had suddenly become a contender in the global nuclear arms race. But perhaps the most unsettling revelation was the involvement of German scientists. These scientists, who had been brought into Iran's service decades earlier, were still contributing to the research under extreme secrecy. Their expertise, particularly in advanced missile guidance systems, was essential to the project. The missiles weren't just being developed with a nuclear payload. They were being engineered for precision strikes, capable of hitting specific military targets with deadly accuracy. Iran's missile systems were rapidly approaching a level of sophistication that could rival or surpass that of both the US and the Soviet Union. The Shadow Sun operation was now operating under a new directive: to neutralize this threat before it could mature. The CIA, shaken by the scope and sophistication of Iran's nuclear missile program, knew they had little time to act. They were facing not just a regional threat, but the possible emergence of a new nuclear superpower that could throw the entire balance of the Cold War into disarray. The discoveries made in the Elburz Mountains were only the beginning of what would become one of the most critical intelligence operations of the 20th century. As the CIA pieced together the full scope of Iran's nuclear ambitions, the world's superpowers would soon be forced to confront a new threat. One that was not only about nuclear missiles, but also about the very nature of international diplomacy in the age of atomic weapons. Iran's potential to disrupt global power dynamics would soon be felt far beyond the borders of the Middle East. The agents who had infiltrated the laboratories had not only gathered irrefutable evidence of a massive nuclear weapons program, but had also uncovered a far-reaching plan to redefine the world's power structures. Iran was no longer just a regional player. It was now a formidable force on the world stage, armed with technology capable of rewriting the rules of global warfare. The question now was, could the CIA stop them in time, or had the world already crossed a point of no return? In the coming weeks, the urgency of the mission grew. The intelligence from the Dark Star document would be the catalyst for a high-stakes diplomatic and military standoff that would forever change the course of history. As the CIA's Shadow Sun operation progressed, the intensity of the mission grew beyond anything Agent Jonathan Jeffries had ever experienced. The stakes were higher than ever, and the situation in Iran had become more perilous by the day. Having already uncovered the depths of Iran's nuclear ambitions through the Dark Star documents, the agents were now tasked with obtaining critical new intelligence. Project 214, which held the key to understanding Iran's advanced nuclear warhead development. Project 214 was one of the most classified and carefully guarded secrets within Iran's military-industrial complex. The information contained within this document was considered so sensitive that it had been kept far from even the highest levels of government knowledge. It wasn't just about conventional nuclear warheads. It detailed the latest breakthroughs in nuclear warhead technology, including the use of new composite materials and advanced fissile materials that could significantly increase the explosive power and efficiency of Iran's weapons. Jeffries and his team had to penetrate the heart of Iran's most secure facilities, hidden deep in the mountainous regions, to gain access to the files. It wasn't just about breaking into a building or stealing a piece of paper. The labs were virtually impenetrable, equipped with state-of-the-art security systems and surrounded by heavily armed guards. The CIA agents used all their resources: satellite surveillance, drone technology, and the latest espionage techniques to plan their approach. The mountains themselves seemed like an almost insurmountable barrier, their harsh terrain designed to keep intruders at bay. For weeks, agents infiltrated these high-security labs posing as international scientists, working undercover in an elaborate scheme to gain access to the files. They had to move carefully, methodically. The consequences of failure were unthinkable. Discovery would mean certain death, not just for the agents, but potentially for the balance of power in the entire Cold War. Eventually, after days of relentless work, a breakthrough came. One of the agents, posing as an expert in nuclear propulsion systems, gained access to a secure underground vault. There, hidden behind layers of encryption and elaborate security measures, was the Project 214 document. It was more than just a blueprint or a list of materials. It was a comprehensive roadmap for Iran's future nuclear capabilities. The contents of the document revealed something that would change the world forever. Iran had successfully developed a new generation of nuclear warheads that were far more advanced than anything previously imagined. These were not just ordinary bombs. They were weapons designed to penetrate the toughest missile defense systems. These warheads were equipped with a new type of fissile material, one that was far more efficient and far more dangerous than the uranium or plutonium traditionally used in nuclear weapons. The technology outlined in Project 214 made previous attempts at nuclear deterrence seem obsolete. The new warheads were smaller, lighter, and capable of generating much higher yields. But it wasn't just about size and power. The true horror of this discovery lay in the fact that these warheads were designed to be quickly deployable, making them incredibly difficult to target and intercept. The missiles carrying these warheads were mobile, which meant they could be launched from a variety of platforms, land, sea, or air, at a moment's notice. This made the Iranian threat not only more immediate but more difficult to contain. As Jeffries read through the document, The magnitude of what Iran had achieved began to sink in. This wasn't just a regional threat, it was a global one. Iran's ability to develop such advanced nuclear weapons meant that they could potentially hold the world hostage. The balance of power was about to shift, and the Cold War, which had been marked by an uneasy standoff between the US and the Soviet Union, was on the verge of being upended by a new and unpredictable player. Iran's weapons were a game-changer, and the United States and the rest of the world had failed to see the threat coming. But the most shocking revelation came when Jeffries discovered that these new warheads were not the product of simple engineering, but the result of a series of secret experiments conducted in isolated areas of Iran, far from the prying eyes of international inspectors. These experiments, known only to a select few in the Iranian government and military, involved the creation of new fissile materials, as well as the testing of exotic nuclear technologies that had not been seen before. The Iranian government had quietly stolen and reverse-engineered technology from both the Soviets and Western powers, incorporating it into their own weapons systems in ways that were previously unimaginable. The document revealed that Iranian scientists had created a new class of materials capable of producing much more power with far less input. The new fissile material, which Iran referred to as Covert, was a hybrid substance that could be refined at a fraction of the cost of uranium or plutonium, while also being far more stable and powerful. This technology, which had been under development for over a decade, had only been perfected in the final stages of the project. Further analysis of Project 214 showed that these materials were not just limited to warheads, but could be applied to a variety of missile systems, making Iran's nuclear arsenal versatile and adaptable. The key to their success was in the development of stealth technology, which allowed their warheads to slip through existing missile defense systems undetected. This technology, though still in its early stages, had already been tested successfully in several underground labs in the Iranian mountains. The tests were held in remote areas, far from the reach of international inspectors or satellite surveillance, where the scientists could test the new missiles and warheads in secret. The secret tests were both a source of pride and a source of deep concern for the Iranian government. On one hand, they had achieved a technological breakthrough that would place them on the map as a global superpower in the nuclear arms race. But on the other hand, they knew that their actions had made them an international pariah, subject to potential military retaliation by the West. Iran's leadership believed that they had no choice but to continue developing these weapons in secret. They saw themselves surrounded by enemies, and they were determined to ensure their own survival at any cost. The tests in the remote regions of Iran also provided insight into their military strategies. The Iranian regime had been conducting underground tests in specially designed chambers, simulating real-world launches to determine the capabilities of their warheads under various environmental conditions. These experiments, though successful in proving the power of the warheads, also raised concerns about the potential environmental impact and global fallout. It was becoming painfully clear that the Iranians were not merely trying to keep pace with the nuclear powers. They were moving ahead at an alarming rate, mastering nuclear technology faster than anyone had anticipated. The experiments, the new materials, the stealth warheads, everything pointed to one inevitable conclusion. Iran was positioning itself to become the most dangerous nuclear power in the world. The game had changed, and the balance of power in the Middle East, and possibly the world, was on the brink of being forever altered. With the Project 214 documents in hand, Jeffries knew that the world could no longer afford to ignore Iran's growing nuclear capabilities. He had uncovered something far more than just a series of technical achievements. He had uncovered a blueprint for a global confrontation that could unravel the careful balance of power between the superpowers. The question now was, how could they stop it before it was too late? As Jeffries looked at the files one last time, the weight of his discovery settled over him like a dark cloud. The world was unaware of the dangerous path Iran was on, and soon the clock would run out. The mission was no longer about gathering information. It was about preventing a disaster of global proportions. And with every passing day, that disaster seemed more inevitable. As Jonathan Jeffries continued to sift through the evidence gathered from the Shadow Sun operation, the full scope of Iran's nuclear ambitions began to take shape before his eyes. The documents, now compiled and cross-referenced, painted a chilling picture of a country on the verge of becoming a nuclear power, one that could potentially reshape the future of global politics. Iran was not just building weapons for defense. They were developing a nuclear missile program capable of striking at the heart of the United States, should the need arise. The most crucial document uncovered in the course of the operation, Project 214, detailed Iran's plan to build a nuclear-capable missile system, one that could be launched from mobile platforms, a terrifying prospect that had the potential to undermine all existing missile defense systems. These missiles, designed to be fast, stealthy, and difficult to detect, could give Iran the ability to strike at critical American cities or military bases, bypassing any conventional defense systems that had been put in place to prevent such an attack. What was even more shocking was the realization that Iran's goal was not merely to establish deterrence. They wanted to shift the balance of global power by using their nuclear missile capability as a tool of political leverage. In the documents, it was made clear that Iran planned to use their missile technology to blackmail the United States and its allies, forcing them to make political concessions by threatening to unleash a nuclear strike. This wasn't about mutual assured destruction. The strategy being developed by Iran was one of asymmetric leverage, where they would hold the threat of destruction over their adversaries, forcing them to negotiate from a position of fear. But the most frightening aspect of this plan wasn't just the missiles or the warheads themselves. It was the network of global connections that Iran had been cultivating to expand its nuclear program. Iran, it turned out, had not been acting alone in its quest for nuclear weapons. Documents revealed secret dealings with Pakistan, as well as other nuclear-capable countries, which played a significant role in the acceleration of Iran's nuclear weapons development. Pakistan, which had already developed its own nuclear weapons, was deeply involved in helping Iran with the scientific and technical aspects of their program. The extent of Pakistan's involvement was far more than a mere exchange of technology. The documents suggested that Pakistan had provided Iran with advanced nuclear weapons designs, as well as the expertise required to build them. The cooperation between these two nations had been conducted in utmost secrecy, with the help of underground networks and shadowy figures within both countries' military and scientific establishments. Pakistan, for its part, had its own reasons for helping Iran. Both countries shared a mutual interest in countering Western influence in the region, and a strong nuclear alliance provided a way for both to secure their sovereignty while challenging the U.S. and its allies. But Iran's alliances didn't stop with Pakistan. They had also established covert connections with other nuclear-armed states, including North Korea, which had long been an outcast on the world stage, but had managed to develop its own nuclear capabilities in isolation. North Korea's nuclear expertise, particularly in missile technology, was a valuable asset to Iran. The collaboration between the two countries involved technology transfer, including data on the design of missiles that could deliver nuclear payloads over long distances. These exchanges were not just theoretical. They were practical steps taken to advance Iran's weapons program in a fraction of the time it would have taken to develop these technologies from scratch. Iran's willingness to forge these alliances, and to do so under the radar of the international community, highlighted the lengths to which the regime was willing to go to achieve its nuclear ambitions. The documents revealed that Iran had already built a network of front companies and shell organizations that were used to facilitate these transactions, hiding the true nature of the deals from global scrutiny. Their ability to secure resources and technology from countries like Pakistan and North Korea made it clear that Iran was not acting alone in its nuclear pursuit. It was building an underground network of allies, each with its own vested interest in the success of Iran's nuclear program. The implications of these findings were profound. If Iran succeeded in developing nuclear weapons with the assistance of these countries, it could change the balance of power not just in the Middle East, but globally. The US and its NATO allies would have to contend with a new, unpredictable nuclear threat, one that could destabilize an already volatile region. The growing nuclear ambitions of Iran, combined with their strategic alliances, meant that the global non-proliferation framework, which had been carefully constructed after World War II, was on the verge of unraveling. The potential consequences of Iran becoming a nuclear power were far-reaching. Regional stability in the Middle East, already fragile, could be irreparably damaged. The already tense relationships between Iran, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and other countries in the region could escalate into open conflict. And Iran, armed with nuclear weapons, would become an uncontainable force, able to exert its influence not only within its immediate borders, but across the entire region. The concept of nuclear deterrence would no longer apply in the same way, as the Iranian regime, unpredictable and increasingly aggressive, could push the boundaries of acceptable state behavior. The international community would also have to contend with the reality that the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, was losing its effectiveness. If Iran, under the guise of peaceful nuclear development, could build nuclear weapons with the help of other rogue states, it would set a dangerous precedent. Other nations, especially those with strained relations with the West, would be emboldened to follow suit, seeing Iran's success as proof that nuclear weapons could be developed outside the scrutiny of international inspections. The diplomatic landscape would change, and the US and Europe would have to consider how to deal with this new nuclear reality. Military intervention, while an option, was fraught with complications. A full-scale military strike against Iran's nuclear facilities would likely provoke not only a military confrontation, but also trigger wider instability across the Middle East, possibly drawing in the Soviet Union, which had its own interests in the region. The alternative, engaging Iran diplomatically, was fraught with challenges, given the regime's belligerent rhetoric and commitment to its nuclear program. In short, Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons with the help of its covert allies would have global repercussions, affecting everything from the balance of power in the Middle East to the future of the Cold War itself. The discovery of this nuclear axis, an alliance of rogue states determined to defy the international community, was a wake-up call for the US and its allies. The fight for control over the global nuclear order had just entered a more dangerous phase, and no one knew how it would end. With Project 214 in hand, Jeffries knew that the CIA now faced an incredibly delicate task: how to contain a threat of unprecedented scale, one that had the potential not only to shift the balance of the Cold War, but to reshape the future of the international order. How the US would respond to this evolving crisis would determine the fate of not just the Middle East, but the future of nuclear non-proliferation itself. As the final stages of Operation Shadow Sun unfolded, the CIA found itself at a critical juncture. The intelligence gathered in Iran, documents detailing the nuclear missile program, connections with rogue states like Pakistan and North Korea, and the highly advanced warhead designs painted a picture of a potential global catastrophe. Iran, a country once seen as a strategic ally in the fight against communism, was on the brink of becoming a nuclear superpower. It was a chilling realization, one that sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. The decision to halt Iran's nuclear ambitions was made after much deliberation. The CIA knew that they couldn't let the information they had uncovered fall into the wrong hands. The stakes were simply too high. A nuclear Iran, with mobile missile systems capable of bypassing the most sophisticated defense technologies, could reshape not just the Middle East, but the entire global balance of power. With this knowledge in hand, the CIA launched a covert strike, a surgical operation designed to sabotage Iran's burgeoning nuclear program without triggering a full-scale conflict. Using a mix of cyber warfare, strategic sabotage, and targeted disinformation, the CIA worked to disrupt key aspects of the Project 214 missile program. The operation was precise, carried out under the radar of international intelligence services. Within weeks, the infrastructure supporting the nuclear missile program had been significantly compromised. It was a masterstroke of espionage. Iran's missile development slowed to a crawl, and its capacity to create new, advanced nuclear weapons was effectively neutralized, at least for the time being. The CIA's success in dismantling Iran's missile systems had, in essence, prevented a global nuclear arms race that could have been sparked by a nuclear Iran. The mission's success preserved the fragile balance of power between the US, the Soviet Union, and other nuclear powers, maintaining an uneasy peace in a world that could have easily descended into nuclear conflict. The ramifications of the CIA's actions were profound. Iran, which could have become a nuclear power capable of wielding influence on the world stage, was now set back by years, if not decades, in its quest for nuclear dominance. The intervention preserved global stability at a time when the Cold War was already on a knife edge. Had the CIA failed in its mission, the world could have seen a new nuclear hegemon in the Middle East, one that could have destabilized not just the region, but the entire geopolitical order. The United States, already dealing with the Soviet threat, would have been faced with an even greater, more unpredictable challenge: an emboldened nuclear Iran. In the years following the operation, the world breathed a sigh of relief. Iran's nuclear capabilities were significantly curtailed, and the immediate threat of a nuclear confrontation seemed to dissipate. But beneath the surface, the questions remained. How long would Iran's ambitions be put on hold? And more pressingly, how long could the world continue to suppress such dangerous technology in a region as volatile as the Middle East? The success of the CIA's mission came at a cost. Iran, now aware of the lengths to which the US was willing to go to prevent its nuclear development, began to shift its strategy. The regime, though momentarily set back, began to pursue more clandestine means of developing nuclear capabilities. It was clear that the world had not seen the last of Iran's nuclear ambitions. Though temporarily diffused, the threat had not been entirely eradicated. The shadows of espionage and covert operations continued to linger. What was left in the Iranian archives? Even though the CIA had succeeded in halting Project 214 for the time being, the question remained: what other pieces of information lay hidden within Iran's top-secret files? The Dark Star documents and Project Shah were just the beginning. If the US had gained access to this information, what else was still locked away in the vaults of Iran's military-industrial complex? What other nuclear secrets remained to be uncovered? The thought that Iran's nuclear capabilities could have advanced further in secret, unaccounted for, was a chilling prospect that lingered in the minds of intelligence agencies. In addition to the covert operations, the Shadow Sun team had uncovered disturbing links to international nuclear black markets, shady transactions between Iran and other countries that were never fully traced. The Project 214 blueprints were just a fragment of a much larger puzzle, one that could still be pieced together by Iran's covert nuclear operatives. Even now, in the shadows of international diplomacy, there were whispers that Iran had not abandoned its nuclear dream entirely. What if these experiments resumed in secret, using even more sophisticated and undetectable methods? The aftermath of the CIA's operation was not without consequences. While the immediate threat had been neutralized, the global community remained on edge. Was this victory a temporary reprieve, or had the CIA merely delayed the inevitable? Iran's commitment to nuclear development had not been eliminated. It had been pushed into the shadows, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. If the world had learned anything from the Cold War, it was that nuclear ambitions often went underground, evolving beyond the reach of surveillance and intelligence. The lingering question that haunted policymakers was whether Iran would ever abandon its pursuit of nuclear weapons. With the success of their covert operation, the CIA had prevented a disaster. But in the back rooms of Washington, the fear remained that Iran's nuclear aspirations were far from over. Could the U.S. maintain its grip on global non-proliferation? Would Iran one day restart its efforts with a new strategy, perhaps even in cooperation with new rogue states or underground nuclear networks? The likelihood of this happening was high, and the possibility of Iran reopening its nuclear program in the future loomed large. The nature of the intelligence world is that the game is never truly over. Even as the CIA celebrated its success in the short term, the long-term consequences of the mission were yet to be realized. The Iranian nuclear question remained unresolved, and the world's superpowers would need to continue their vigilance. Had Iran truly been thwarted, or had the CIA simply delayed a much larger storm? The answers to these questions would define the future of global security for decades to come. As the world watched from the sidelines, there was one final critical question. Was the shadow of nuclear conflict in the Middle East truly gone, or would the threat of an Iranian nuclear arsenal rise again, more powerful and more dangerous than before? The next chapter in this high-stakes game had yet to be written, but one thing was certain. The lessons of Operation Shadow Sun would echo throughout history, as a reminder of just how close the world came to the brink of disaster, and how fragile the balance of peace truly is. The clock was still ticking.